So this is the Law School Toolkit Introduction to the PreLaw Coursework, which is primarily what we're going to be focusing on today. So we'll go over a little bit more about why we created the PreLaw Courseworks and what the goal of having this courseworks is. But again, primarily we're going to be going over that, and while I go over the courseworks, we're going to be really going over the checklist, which is kind of like a mini version of the PreLaw overview session for anybody that joined that either in person or remotely. Oh, that's weird. My name was on the other screen. Anyway, so I'm Alexa Hamill. I am one of the associate directors for the advising and programming team. I'm also an alum of the college. I graduated in 2013. So in addition to doing individual advising, which is of course any career advising, in addition to grad school advising, and I'm the primary person that really focuses on law school, in addition to two other advisors in the office. I oversee Barnard Connect, which is the networking platform that's designed exclusively for Barnard students and alums. And I oversee also our Mentors in Residence program. So I'm really excited to talk to you all today. Okay. So, Beyond Barnard Summer Colloquium 2020. So we'll go over specifically the law series, what's to come. This is the first session, part of our 3-part law series. But in addition to doing the law series, we have an awesome set of events really geared towards whatever you could possibly need, whether you're an alum wanting to do a webinar series on career skills. We had career skills last week. We have a variety of different grad programs, fellowships. So all of these are under the event section on Handshake. I would definitely take advantage of that, take a look at that. And if you're interested in registering for any of them, all of the information is in there. So definitely feel free to take advantage of that. We have over 70, 75 events coming up. So like I said, we're gonna be just speaking about the law series and what's to come. So today, like I said, we're going to be going over the toolkit, primarily focusing on now our PreLaw courseworks. Tomorrow, we are going to be having a panel of current law school students who are Barnard alums. So really getting their perspective on everything from applying to how it is being a law school student. And then on Wednesday, we are going to have a representative from NYU Law. He's the assistant director for JD admissions at NYU, and Dean Youngblood Giles, who was the PreLaw advisor before we started, will be kind of interviewing him, having a conversation so you can get to know the ins and outs of the admissions side. So definitely take advantage of that, like all of the other events. They're under the event section on Handshake, so feel free to register there. Okay. So for today's agenda, so first thing we're going to really talk about is the motivation to attend law school. Why are you interested? Where are you in the process? How set are you on law school, and why you're motivated to now be applying? Then we're going to be going over our PreLaw courseworks, and then we're going to be going over next steps after we go over the courseworks, what you can do and how you can get access to that coursework. Okay. So like I said, we're going to first start with reflecting on your motivation to go to law school. So this is something that's really critical. I know we're really here to go over once you have decided what the process looks like, but this is a really critical step in assessing if law school is right for you. You know, as I'm sure you all know, law school is time consuming, it's work, it's expensive, in addition to the amazing things that come out of going to law school. But because of all of those different aspects, having a true focus and motivation for going to law school is really critical for yourself, and knowing that you're choosing the correct grad program in order to achieve your long-term goals. But then when you go over the personal statement and eventually start drafting it, you'll also see how important it is to really have a focus on your motivation to go to law school, because of how focused and how critical that part of the application is, and needing to have that focus and have an idea of your long-term goals and why you really need a JD to achieve that is going to be very important. So I always like to start here and kind of take the time, because this is something that you also really want to take the time doing. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for just a second, just so we can have more of a conversation. So in your chat box, you know, if anybody wants to kind of just give, whether it's, you can message me personally, message everybody, what is your motivation for going to law school? Okay, so someone said they're interested in law and want to practice it. Great. So what specifically about law, and why do you need a JD in order to be able to achieve whatever you're looking to study? Great. So working in public interest law, criminal defender, awesome. Reproductive justice advocate, great. What else? And it doesn't have to be that you know exactly what specialty you want to do. I'm just saying, what's your motivation in general for being here and for wanting to apply? Okay. Working an intersection of social justice and entertainment, using law to help survivors of trauma and intergenerational trauma access reparations. Amazing. Enable change in government, whether for the federal or banking law, still unsure of the specifics, potentially working in politics, government. Amazing. Okay, so these are all really great reasons. And again, the reason why I really want to point this out to you is because some common motivations that I think, of course, there's no like wrong motivation, but some things that I kind of will say to an alum or student to take a step back from when I'm asking what their motivation is one, you know, you want to help people. I think that's so important, that's so critical. I usually respond back to something like that though and say that there are a lot of careers where you can help people. I mean, I like to think I'm helping people. I don't have a JD. So when you're thinking about this, you want to know, why is it critical to have a JD in order to achieve your goals? Again, for yourself, so you know, do I need to be spending time and money getting a law degree in order to achieve my goals? And again, also for your personal statement. We're not going to be going too much into the ins and outs of the personal statement, but a really common mistake I see is covering the why law school, really to help people. And again, they don't want to know, you know, they're going to say to you, well, you can help people in a lot of different ways. Why do you not want an MD, or why are you even getting a JD? So really knowing that is critical. Another, I would say, motivation that I would kind of ask back and kind of look into further is, a lot of times I find law school to be like a default for whatever reason. I mean, law school is super transferable to an extent, but I find that with graduate school in general, and specifically law school, to be a default. And again, you can see that the time, the money, the effort to have law school be a default is maybe not the best motivation to go. So again, if you want to talk through this motivation because you're still assessing and that's why you're here, amazing, feel free to take advantage of this. But I do highly recommend, if you are considering if grad school in general, if law school specifically is right for you, always feel free to have that conversation with a pre-law advisor. I'm happy to bounce those ideas off of you so you can assess before starting the process if this is the right decision for you. So let me go back to sharing my screen. Okay. Okay. So before we get started, so you've decided law school is for you, you're going, amazing. Now we're kind of going to get the process started in terms of what the checklist is, making sure that you're getting everything done at the appropriate time, so you're staying in line and you're able to get all of the various items in check before applications actually open. Before we get started on actually going over this process, I do want to go over some acronyms, which can be confusing because there's a lot within pre-law. So these are the three acronyms that I'm going to be referencing, you'll see everywhere. So there's LSAC, LSAT, and CAS. So LSAC is the Law School Admissions Council. So you can think of that almost as like the umbrella. This is the site that you're going to be going to everywhere from figuring out what schools you want to apply for, preparing for the LSAT, to actually applying for law schools. The LSAT is the law school admissions test. So this is the exam that you are going to be taking if you choose the LSAT, because you could also take the GRE. This is the law school admissions test that you would take, which again, you can find all information about LSAT through LSAC, the site. And then CAS is the Credential Assembly Service. So CAS is the service that generates the law school report that then gets sent to the law schools. So when you're applying for law school as opposed to undergrad, you're submitting all of your applications through LSAC. So what you're going to do is you're going to say the schools that you are interested in applying for, and then CAS will create the law school report, which will have all of your, numbers from your LSAT, GPA, where other scores from Barnard in general. So it will be just their one-stop shop for everything aside from kind of the supplemental essays and everything else that you'll be doing, which requires, a different part of the application. So again, when I'm referencing these acronyms, now you kind of have an idea about who they are and what they mean. So now we are going to get started on PreLaw Coursework. So I'm just going to stop my share one more time just so I can pull up the toolkit. Okay. So, okay, cool. All right. So this is the PreLaw toolkit. So the reason why we call it a toolkit, Beyond Barnard toolkit, is because this is where it has the various components when it relates to anything pre-law. So this is going to be the checklist, this is going to be the overview, and this is going to be the personal statement. The reason why we created the coursework is because, especially for those initial conversations, they're really exactly the same, right? Everybody's requirements are the same. The basic information is the same for everybody. So this coursework is your first step for any questions related to applying and preparing for law school. So again, we're going to be going over the checklist, but we have the pre-law overview session and we have the pre-law personal statement sessions on this site. So if you just want to know more about how can you prepare for your personal statement, what are some things that you can start thinking about? What is a diversity statement? What should I consider when I'm evaluating law schools? You'll have these other two resources for those additional details. So that way, when you do make an appointment with a pre-law advisor, your questions are much more focused. So if you need, of course, clarification, there's something that's missing that you want to know about, more about something unique to kind of your application, of course, we're here for you, but this is really to ensure that we're not kind of saying the same thing and everybody can access that here. Part of the next steps will be, if you are interested in being added to the PreLaw Coursework, to email me after, which again, I'll have my email and everything at the end. So if you're interested in having access to coursework, you can. And anybody in the future that's interested in pre-law, we do require this as the first step before scheduling an individual appointment with a pre-law advisor. Okay. So again, we're going to be going over the checklist, which is right here. So this is the checklist. Again, we're not going to be going over the pre-law overview or the personal statement in depth, but we have the PowerPoint and we have the webinar because we also did these when we started going remote. So during the checklist, if it references a personal statement and you're like, oh, I have a question about that, before doing an appointment, make sure you review this statement. Or like I said, we're going to be going over, this is when you should start picking out law schools. If you have questions about evaluating law schools, I would go to the overview session, and anything else accordingly, I would choose the appropriate resource. So we're going to start with the seasons. The reason why I didn't put years and I put seasons is because some applicants will choose to not go to law school right away. Some will in the future, they'll be, when they're juniors, the years are going to look different, the semesters. So this would be as if right now for the spring semester, you would be applying for that fall. So that's how you can think of these seasons. So let's start with the spring right here. So these are the steps that you're going to take in the spring. First thing, of course, preparing for the LSAT. A great resource that LSAT has is a resource called Khan Academy. It is a free resource that helps with preparing for the LSAT. It's an awesome resource. I have previous applicants that say it's sufficient. Other times they need more formal courses like a Kaplan, totally fine. But I definitely suggest checking out that first because it is free and it is a great resource. So the national average in terms of preparing for an LSAT, because I will have applicants ask me that when they should start. Of course, it depends on the student, on the applicant, depending on how well you learn, standardized exams, things like that. But on average, it takes 10 to 12 hours over a 3-month period to prepare for the LSAT. It could take more, it could take less, but if you're thinking about how much time do I definitely want to make sure that I'm saving, that's generally the time frame that I would suggest. So actually sitting for your first LSAT. The reason why I usually suggest sitting for your first LSAT in the spring is because ideally you're going to leave yourself 2 opportunities to take the LSAT. It's not necessary that you take it twice, but I like to tell applicants to have the option. So for whatever reason, if they don't like their first score, they can take another one and it not be too late into the cycle of actually applying. Sometimes I'll have applicants sit for 2 LSATs in the summer, sometimes 1 in the spring, like I said, 1 in the summer. I will have some applicants choose to sit for the October one, which they'll sometimes have, but ideally, if you're preparing far enough in advance, and you'll see why because of when I recommend actually applying, if you can take your first LSAT in the spring or early summer, I will suggest that. Something else you want to consider with the LSAT. So there's something called disclosed scores and undisclosed scores. Disclosed scores mean that you get to know how you performed in each section of the LSAT. Undisclosed means that you just get your total score of your LSAT. So not every single LSAT will be disclosed. So I don't want you to wait to take your first LSAT until you are able to sit for a disclosed one, because obviously I'd rather you keep on tracking your timeline. But if you can sit for a disclosed for your first LSAT, that would be great, because then you can assess what sections of the LSAT do you want to work on for the future. If you go on LSAT, it'll tell you which LSATs have disclosed scores versus undisclosed. Again, I wouldn't wait to take it until it is disclosed, but if you can, that would be ideal. Evaluating potential law schools. So again, I speak a lot about this in the overview session, but we can briefly go over some of my suggestions and some of the items that I would suggest when you're evaluating potential law schools. So first thing you want to think about is financial aid. You want to think about financial aid, merit scholarships. Again, law school is extremely expensive. If you can ideally get money to go towards, you're taking out less loans, amazing. I can't emphasize enough, if a school is offering you money, how valuable that's going to be in terms of your long term. So before I go to the rest of the items when it comes to what else to evaluate, let's just talk about rankings really quickly. So usually students will automatically, and I say students, but I really just mean applicants. Applicants will automatically go for the school that is the best rank that they got into. But figure if it's a reach school for you, the chances of getting money from them is not that high. And I'm talking about like merit scholarship, a lot of financial aid. Reason being is they know students are still going to go because they're ranked very highly. And on the other side, a lot of times schools will be incentivized to give money, because if you have an awesome LSAT and a GPA, they want your numbers to bring up their scores. So their median is high, their ranking's getting higher. So figure, again, if it's a reach school for you and you get in, by all means, if you choose to go, if money is not a large factor when you're considering law school. But if you're thinking, where can I be getting money from? As you can imagine, it's not going to be necessarily a lot, if any, from those reach schools. When it also comes to ranking is, I would say top 5 law schools really open doors for a lot of things. Once you get out of those top rankings, I wouldn't say that, again, I would just go by, oh, what's the next best ranking? Because at some point, again, I would say which schools are giving you money, I would say should supersede that. Again, if finances isn't something that you're taking into consideration when you're looking at schools, totally fine. But I do like to bring that up because that is something that I notice when it comes to where should I choose and should it just be the best school that I get into. Other things that you should take into consideration, and I'll kind of go in order of where I would say is priority. So for me, in addition to where you're getting money, it's going to be location. So the reason why you really want to pay attention to location is because you'll have a lot of opportunities to network, of course, summer opportunities, clinics, which is the hands-on experience that you'll gain, are all really important. And then also that law school will prepare you for the bar in that state. So it's not to say, you know, I have applicants that go to Boston that ultimately want to come back to New York, go to California, come back. You know, it's not like if you don't go to law school in the state you want to practice, that's automatically going to put you at a disadvantage. But ideally, if you can do that for those reasons, I do suggest thinking about location. Clinics, like I said, are hands-on experience. So if you do have a very specific interest, if you're interested in public interest law, you know, and that school has a great clinic related to public interest, that could be a great option for you. So again, you're networking, you're getting that really hands-on experience. Bar passage rate. So how many people from that law school are actually passing the bar? Graduate employment rate. How many of those graduates of that law school are actually getting employed, and then job placement, where are they actually getting placed in terms of jobs. So these are all things that you want to think about when you're considering schools. Again, this is listed in the overview session, but I just wanted to go into a little bit more detail about each of these. And then the last thing you want to think about for this spring is attending info sessions. A lot of them are virtual as it is, but especially as you can imagine now, a lot of them are virtual. So definitely take advantage of that. Ask those school-specific questions. Hear from admissions people about things that they value, that they look for. Definitely take advantage of that. And I should have mentioned this in the beginning, but we will have time for questions at the end. I just want to save it for the end in case the questions that you do have now are going to be coming up in the later part of the presentation. Okay. So now summer. Again, sit for the second LSAT if needed. If you don't need to, totally fine. Again, I just like to give the option to have at least 2 opportunities. Complete the personal statement and the diversity statement. Again, the session, you know, we have its own session because of how lengthy it is in terms of what the personal statement is, what the diversity statement is. So I'm not going to really be going into too much depth about that. But again, we have the personal statement overview in under the courseworks as well. Begin reviewing personal statement and diversity statement with a pre-law advisor. So as opposed to a cover letter, which some of you may have reviewed with Beyond Barnard before, I will say looking at your personal statement and diversity statement is definitely longer than like looking at a cover letter because of how much it's weighed in the application. And because a lot of times I find, especially in the beginning, they're really rough drafts. It could be that you're changing the topic completely after reviewing it with a pre-law advisor. So you want to save enough time that if you are making these really drastic changes, that you have enough time in between appointments with the pre-law advisor to make these edits and then review again. So usually in the summer, that's primarily when we're reviewing those first drafts of your personal statement and diversity statement, because you do know that that is something that you're going to submit. So if you can kind of do that now while you have the time before applications open, so it's starting to get pretty much almost set up, that will definitely save you time and so you can keep on track. Requesting letters of recommendation. So some schools will require as few as 2. Sometimes they allow as many as 4. Generally, I would say law school is going to be 3 letters of recommendation. It's very, very critical that you're getting recommendation letters from faculty members. So the reason why we say that is because if you're going to be a law student, that school wants to know who are you as a student, which only a professor or somebody you took a class with can really speak to. If you intern somewhere and you think you can get an awesome letter from a supervisor or something like that, you know, I would say that's the exception. And you can consider, for example, if you're submitting 3, having 1 of them. But ideally, your letters of recommendation are coming from faculty members, because again, you want them to speak to specific instances of who you are as a student, which only somebody that you took a class with can really speak to. Request transcripts from all schools, Barnard, abroad programs, summer courses, etc. So the reason why you're requesting transcripts from every single school that you took courses, even though I know Barnard most of the time, I mean, I'm not in the academic, so I can't speak to like everything, but I know that most of the time, if you're taking a course outside of Barnard, they'll count it as credits, but not necessarily the grade. Law school will want to see the grades for how you performed within all of these different schools, because they will recalculate your GPA to account for items like these where Barnard's not accounting for the GPA. Another thing you want to think about with transcripts is they will also look at how you scored in specific courses. So they're not just necessarily looking at your GPA, they're looking at how did you perform in certain courses, which can actually work really well for some people who maybe as a core Barnard requirement, you have to take a science class, you didn't do that well, and it brought your GPA down, as opposed to law school just looking at your overall GPA. They will say, oh, she didn't score that well in this, but it's a science course and it's not necessarily skills related to what you'd be doing in law school or as a lawyer. So they will not just look at GPA, they'll look at specific courses and they'll focus mostly on those transferable courses and focus on that. So if your GPA is brought down by something that's not relevant to what you'd be doing in law school, great, because they will account for that when they're recalculating GPAs and when they're looking at those individual courses on your transcripts. Okay, so fall. Most applications will open between September 1st and the 15th, but they can also open anywhere from as early as August to as late as October. Again, you are going to be applying through LSAC for all of the schools. You're not applying through the individual law school, you're applying through LSAC. So all of the applications will open during a set time. So when they're out for everybody. I can't emphasize enough rolling admissions for law school. Rolling admissions is very, very, very much rolling for law schools, meaning that as soon as they get your application, they're gonna start reviewing it. So as you can imagine, the longer you wait to apply, the smaller the pool of openings are in terms of seats, the smaller the pool of money for any sort of financial aid or merit scholarship. So of course, you don't want to apply early just for the sake of applying. You want to make sure all of your documents are as great as they can be. You have your LSAT, everything else. But the reason why we suggest doing all these other things earlier is so that way there's only a few things that you're really doing once applications actually open. So of course, you won't know what the supplemental essays are for individual schools until the applications open. And some schools will have supplemental essays. That means additional essays that have more of a focus of like a prompt. So I know Michigan has had that in the past. Georgetown has had that. They're usually shorter in terms of like format. So they're usually not as long as like a personal statement and diversity statement, because they don't want a lot of supplemental essays to deter you from applying and doing additional writing samples, but some of the schools will have that. So if that's the case, you can, similar to your personal statement and diversity statement, review that with a PreLaw advisor. If applicable, beginning October 1st of the year before you're actually going to be matriculating, you can submit the free application for federal student aid. By the end of October, and these are all our suggested dates. So winter is really when applications are due, but we say by end of October, finalize your application, and then we recommend no later than mid-November actually submitting the applications. Again, for all the reasons that I stated before about the difficulty in terms of how hard it is once you're going to be getting towards the deadline. Okay. And then finally, winter. So in the winter, you're going to be reviewing responses from law schools, and you may start getting responses again because it is rolling. You may be hearing earlier than some people, depending on how early you applied. So you're going to be reviewing responses from law schools. If you're placed on hold or a wait list, definitely feel free to consult with us. As PreLaw Advisors, we have some suggestions and strategies for that. Attend open house events for admitted students. Again, kind of like the info session, get the ins and outs and the particulars when it comes to that law school, clinics, faculty, things that, you know, are very small details, but can make a really big difference in how it fits in with your interests and your long-term goals. Confirm your acceptance. Make sure you're paying attention to when deposits are due. Sometimes if you are getting money from the school, they'll have an earlier deposit because they want to leave the option for, they usually have an earlier deposit because they want to leave the option to be able to negotiate money with other students, and they want to know how much money they're going to have left. So I don't know if that exactly makes sense, but basically they want to know sooner rather than later if you're going to be accepting, because if you're not, they'll know they have the money they would be giving to you to negotiate potentially with another potential acceptance. And then inform schools you will not be attending, just so again, they know how many seats people on the wait list or on hold can then be taken off once they start having an idea about how many of their first rounds of offers will actually be accepting. So again, that is going to be it, but I just wanted to again point out, so this is the overview PowerPoint. It goes into a little bit more depth than what I just mentioned in the checklist. This is the webinar, so this is just really the same PowerPoint, but in a webinar form, because once we went remote. And then we have the personal statement PowerPoint, more details about that and strategies on how to prepare for that, and then the webinar here. Okay. So before I take questions, I'm just going to stop sharing for a second. Okay. Okay, so now in terms of next steps. So email me again at the email here if you're interested in being added to the PreLaw Coursework. Again, this is going to be for anybody in the future that has the initial question for PreLaw as the first step. So I can definitely add you. And if you have friends or peers and you want to relay the message, I'm happy to add anybody to that. So just email me. Again, it is your first step, so I would review the PreLaw overview and personal statement PowerPoints and or webinars, depending on what stage you're at. And then once you review that and you have more specific questions, you're interested in actually looking at drafts of any essays that you have, we're happy to look at that. Or if you have, again, specific questions, unique things that are related to your application, clarification questions, you can always schedule an appointment with a PreLaw advisor on Handshake. When you schedule the appointment, when you choose PreLaw, all the PreLaw advisors will come up, so feel free to make an appointment. We're open for the summer for appointments. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. Before I forget, you guys will be getting this PowerPoint. I mean, there's not so much in the PowerPoint itself, but you guys will be getting it in a follow-up email tomorrow. So for those items, you can reference that. If anybody just came in, I would say if you go up in the chat from Christine, there is a sign-in sheet, a Google Doc. So if you can just sign in there, if you came in a little bit later, that would be great. So if you guys have questions, please put it in the chat box. And even though it's addressed to everybody, I will be reading out loud what the questions are. Okay. Who are the other PreLaw advisors? So you don't need to worry. I mean, if you want to know who their names are, it's Christine Shin and Lindsay Granger Weaver, but you don't have to worry about memorizing that. When you click on PreLaw advisors in Handshake to schedule an appointment, only the advisors that advise on PreLaw will come up. So you can just choose if it's more based on availability. 10 to 12 hours total over a 3-month period, or 10 to 12 hours a week over a 3-month period. So I think that's probably clarifying what I meant by preparing for the LSAT. It's definitely 10 to 12 hours per week over a 3-month period. It would definitely be more than just 10 to 12 hours preparing for the LSAT. So 10 to 12 hours per week over a 3-month period. How will COVID mandatory Ps affect our applications? Also, do you have any recommendations as to approaching professors for letters of rec? So employers are understanding of the unique situation that's going on right now with COVID. So if you wanted to, like in an addendum, you always have the opportunity if you want to explain anything further, which is again kind of like its own question. So if you have questions about an addendum, feel free to ask me. But you can say, you know, given COVID and taking mandatory classes remote, it was required that I take PDF or however they classify it, and they'll understand that. Sometimes I'll have students who, I mean, this is just unfortunate, right? So some students will say, I was really banking on certain grades to bring up my GPA for law school. So if you are taking a class and you feel like it's really transferable and you think that it's really important that they know what you could have gotten, I wouldn't say it's worth like in an addendum saying like, I would have done, you know, really well in this class, right? Because they're like taking your word for it. I would say if that's the case, consider having one of your letters of recommendation coming from that professor so they can speak to, again, those specific instances that made you a great student in their class. And then if it's coming from the professor that despite requiring PDF, I would have anticipated this student getting this grade, I think that that can hold really great value for that. So that's a strategy that some students that I've worked with have taken. If again, they were really hoping for a class that was PDF to then, you know, be more visible in terms of what the actual grade would be if it's coming from the professor. If we plan on taking time off between graduation and law school, should we ask professors? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't answer the question about approaching professors for letters of rec. So regardless of whether it's law school or any letters of rec, you want to give the person that's writing the letter of recommendation at least 30 days to write it. I say if you know sooner rather than later that you are going to be applying for law school, I just like to say, ask those professors, put it on their radar. You can reach back out as you get closer to when they were going to be getting the link from LSAC saying like you were requested to submit a letter of recommendation. But again, I think asking earlier so it's on their radar, so it's not such a surprise. They're kind of already starting to think about maybe some things that they want to write about you. If they're not able to write it for you, you know, you have time to reach out to other recommenders. And I think always setting up time to speak over the phone or eventually when we go back in person, speaking in person, I think is always the best way of asking initially. I think it is a big ask. I think that it is very personal. So I think having a dialogue when you are requesting, I think is really important. So that's something that I also suggest doing. If we plan on taking time off between graduation and law school, should we ask professors for letters of rec before we leave Barnard or when it comes time to apply? So there is a site called Interfolio, and it's a site where they will store letters of recommendation if you are looking to take time off in between. There is a fee for it. So usually I just say, I mean, in general, when you have a conversation about letters of rec, they may not remember all of the fine details about who you were specifically. So whether it's because you took time in between, if it's because you just aren't taking time, but you want to have a conversation about the specifics that you think would be important for them to include in the letter of rec. I think when you're having that initial conversation, saying that, you know, you're happy to discuss, specific examples that you think would be important to highlight in your letter of recommendation, I think would be great. So for the same reason why somebody who isn't taking time would do that, I think if you can do that and not have to pay the fee for Interfolio, I think that's sufficient. It may just be a lengthier conversation if, the more time you take between. Would you mind repeating what you said about national average prep time for LSAT? Yeah, so the national average prep time, and I wouldn't say this is like, again, this is not for everybody. Some people may take longer or shorter depending on just who they are as a student, the the content of what they're studying, but national average is 10 to 12 hours per week over a 3-month period. I also forgot to say, and what brought it up for me was national average, is the national average for number of schools that students will apply to law schools is 7. The reason why it's 7, which could be a much smaller number than for undergrad for some of you, is because there are fees associated, and it could get expensive when you're applying for law school, because there's the LSAT fee, there's the CAS fee, which again is the service that provides the law school report. So I think it's like $195 for up to 4 schools was the last time that I checked. It could have changed. So obviously that's an expense, and any school in addition to that would be an additional fee for CAS. And then you have the individual schools application fee. I have in the overview session, if you're looking for fee waivers, depending on what you're looking for a fee waiver for, whether it's the LSAT, CAS, LSAC, I have in the overview session what you should do if you're requesting that, or if you're at need, like what you can do in order to look into that or to request for those fees to be waived. If we're unsure of where we will be in October due to uncertainty about the college's decision to allow us back on campus, what do you think we should do in regard to registering for the LSAT? I don't know. So I'm assuming you mean like where you should take the LSAT. If you wanted to, I mean, that's a really specific question for LSAT, so you can always contact LSAC for that. I would say if you register for the LSAT, I mean, before doing this, like it's money, so I don't want to say the wrong thing, but I would ask LSAT if you are going to be registering for an LSAT in New York and then you end up needing to take it wherever you are, that they would allow you to transfer that. Most likely, if we're going to be remote at Barnard, it's most likely going to be because of a state mandate, which would most likely mean that LSAT would be taken remote anyway, which wouldn't be an issue then, depending on where you're going to be actually sitting there, if it's going to be taken remote. But again, if you reach out to LSAC specifically, they'll let you know, but obviously they're being really understanding, so I'm sure they'll be flexible with you because these things are really out of your control. Okay, Stephanie, thanks so much for a great webinar. You're welcome. What resources are available to Barnard students after they graduate? How to contact PreLaw Advisors? Also, if I'm applying a year or 2 after graduate college, can you advise how I should get letters of rec? So I already spoke about the letters of rec. If you're interested, when you're an alum, so something that's great for any senior is Barnard is lifelong alumni advising. It's very unique. A lot of other schools will have alumni advising, but after a certain number of years, they'll have a fee. It's free. So you would create an alumni account on Handshake, and just like you would make an appointment for a career advisor, you would choose graduate school pre-law advising, and then all of the pre-law advisors will come up and you can choose the time that you're interested. If you're interested or have questions about Handshake, how to get an account, anything like that, you can just email beyondbarnard@barnard.edu, and one of the admins in the office can help you with setting that up. Will we still have access to the PreLaw Coursework page after we graduate? Yeah, so with Coursework, so there is I can add you as an alum. So if you want to email me that you want to be added to Coursework and you want to give me your personal email address because you're graduating or whatever, you can be added as an alum. I think eventually for anybody outside of the GBEAR accounts, there's an expiration. So for whatever reason, if it expires and you're trying to log back in and it should take at least a few months for it to expire, you can always reach back out to me and I can re-add you. So you can definitely do that. Also with COVID and the LSAT Flex, how do you think law schools will look at applications? Will it be more GPA heavy? I would say in general with law school, they're gonna look at everything, they will. But it's a much more holistic view than it was in maybe undergrad. I would say just because you're a couple of points lower on the median GPA or LSAT, it's not an automatic rejection like it may be for undergrad. So if you're concerned that your LSAT is a little bit lower, if your GPA is a little bit lower, that's where I would say like a personal statement is really critical, diversity statement, letters of recommendation. So there are other areas that you can make up for it. But I wouldn't say just because it's the LSAT flex that there's any more or less emphasis put on it. But in general, it's just a much more holistic view. But again, on Wednesday, we're having a law school admissions rep there. So that would be a great question for the representative from NYU Law. What are the transferable courses? So again, obviously there's no like pre-law major at Barnard. So there aren't necessarily like pre-law 101 is transferable, but if you can anticipate the types of courses or the types of skills you'll be using in law school, try to think about that when you're choosing courses or when you're thinking about what are the classes that I want to make sure I'm doing well in. A writing course, anything requiring critical thinking, analytical skills, reading comprehension, those are all things that you can anticipate being transferable, of course, in addition to any high-level seminar that does have to actually do with like law, government, politics, things like that. Sorry, I'm going a little bit quick. I just want to make sure I'm getting to everybody's questions. Thank you very much. You're welcome, Ari. Are there types of classes you tend to recommend pre-law students take, which I just recommended, either to build certain skills for the LSAT or to come into law school with a certain amount of background info in a particular area? So again, it's thinking more about transferable skills because again, there's no like pre-law track. I'm not an academic advisor, so I can't necessarily speak to like take this course. But I think when you're thinking more about those skills that you're acquiring, that's what you want to think about in addition to any high level seminars. But that again is a great question for the admissions representative who will be there on Wednesday. So I would ask them that. What are you hearing from students who have taken the LSAT flex? Honestly, students haven't really been saying anything to me, which could be a good sign or a bad sign. I'm not really sure. I haven't heard anything like I said about it. I mean, obviously, if anything, like from like the couple of students who I've heard some things and it wasn't even necessarily contacting me to directly address it, was more like, oh, it was, you know, obviously it's a little bit different taking something, you know, remote and taking an exam like this. So it's more of, I think, just a different new way of taking it that no one's done before. So I think in that sense, it's a little bit unique, but I mean, I really haven't heard too many things personally from students who have taken the flex. So maybe that's a good thing then, because they're finding it that it's not that different from taking it in person. I think I got to all the questions. If I didn't, feel free to put your question back in to the chat or put in any other questions you have. We still have a couple more minutes left. And again, I know I sound like a broken record, but if you haven't signed in, the shared doc, I'll actually just, re-put the document back in. If you can just please sign in. And again, if you want to be added to the courseworks, just make sure that you email me after to be added, and I'll be happy to do that. And here's my email. Would you recommend a JD for someone who may want to be would you recommend a JD for someone who may want to be involved in policy work or politics? It depends on what you want to be doing within policy work or politics. I would say questions about like if law school is right for you, I would say make an appointment with an advisor, because that requires like a little bit more of a dialogue and clarification questions, because there's so many different things you can do within policy work and politics. Some require JD, some don't. So I would say if you want to just schedule a follow-up appointment with a PreLaw advisor, we can definitely talk more about that. Anything else? Wait one more minute just in case anyone has follow-up questions. You're welcome, Steph. Oh, you're welcome, Leah. You guys are so nice. I'm happy this went well. weird doing this virtually. You're welcome. Okay, cool. So if there aren't any more questions, thank you guys so much again for coming. I hope you're all doing well, taking care of yourself. I'm so happy to hear that this was helpful for you all. And feel free to reach out if I can help with anything else. I hope you guys are enjoying yourself too, and take care. Have some fun. It's summer, as much as you can at least, but it was really good seeing you all virtually. I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.